Portland. A night in November. Third floor of a psychiatric ward. The woman tears open the lining of her pillowcase and pulls out a black marker she'd kept hidden for days. The camera in the corner records everything, but no one sits down to watch the footage until the next morning, when it's already too late. She isn't panicking. She walks to the wall beside her bed, and she begins to draw, not the frantic scratching of someone unraveling. Circles, precise, deliberate like an architect who already knows every line by heart. Each ring holds a name, a city, a year long dead. Bruges, 1533. Vienna, 1687. Her hand trembles. The marker stops mid-stroke. Out in the hallway, footsteps. Coming closer. She draws faster. At the very center, an open eye. 3 roses. Thorns wound around the stems like wire. Then she sits on the edge of the bed, looks straight into the camera, and begins to speak in a Latin no living person can understand. The door handle starts to turn. Portland, Oregon, 2013. Roram 14B, psychiatric ward. 3rd floor. The security camera in the corner recorded everything. Nobody watched the footage until the morning after. By then it was too late to matter. And the woman inside was already gone. Her name was Iris Calloway, 40, 1 year old, good teeth. A small scar above her left eyebrow from a bicycle accident when she was 9. She had a daughter named Nora who was 11 and didn't fully understand what a psychiatric hold meant, only that it meant she couldn't see her mother on Tuesdays anymore. What the camera recorded between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. on a Thursday in November was this. Iris got out of bed, calmly. No distress. She walked to the window first, looked out at the parking lot below for a long time. Then she turned around, picked up a black marker she had kept hidden inside the lining of her pillowcase, and began to draw on the wall beside her bed, not scribbling. Not the frantic scratching of someone unraveling, darong, deliberately, like an architect who already knows what the building looks like and is simply putting it on paper, concentric circles, dozens of them. Inside each ring, a name, a city, a year, 1533, Vienna, 1687, Edinburgh, 1891. The circles spiraled inward, getting smaller, getting tighter, until they reached a single point at the center, an open eye. 3 roses, thorns wound around the stems like wire. Iris stepped back and looked at what she had made. She nodded once. The way a person nods when they've just remembered something important they were afraid they might forget. Then she sat down on the edge of her bed, folded her hands in her lap, and looked directly into the security camera. She spoke for 3 minutes, in Latin. Clear, unhurried, precise Latin that the night orderly, who watched the footage the next morning with 2 police officers and the attending physician, described as unlike anything he had ever heard. Not prayer, not rambling. Something more like a legal statement. The reading of terms, the recording of facts for whoever might be listening later. 3 days after that night, Iris Calloway was found unresponsive in her bed at 6:47 a.m. Cause of death: cardiac failure. Nobody connected it to anything. Nobody looked at the wall for a second time. The facility repainted the room by the following Monday. The case was closed. And Nora Calloway, 11 years old, standing in a beige hallway with a paper cup of apple juice she couldn't drink, was told by a social worker with kind eyes and no answers that her mother was gone. She didn't cry, not right away. She looked down at her paper cup. She thought about the last visit, 2 weeks before, how her mother had grabbed her wrist at the end, pressed her thumb against the inside of her own wrist, against a faded tattoo Nora had always been curious about, an eye. 3 roses, and said very quietly, as the orderly was already opening the door, "When he finds you, and he will find you, don't run." Give him a chance to explain, Nora had said. Who? And her mother had smiled, like the answer was obvious. Like Nora was asking who made the sun come up. She didn't say the name. The orderly said time was up. And that was the last thing Iris Calloway ever said to her daughter. Brooklyn, 2025. November. Nora Calloway was 24 years old, and she was currently losing a war against a commercial espresso machine that was, in her professional opinion, possessed by something ancient and deeply personal in its malice. The machine was called a Slayer, which told you everything you needed to know about whoever designed it. 5:13 in the morning. The Blackthorn coffee on Atlantic Avenue smelled like dark roast and old radiator heat and the specific exhaustion of someone who had worked a double shift 4 days running. The rain outside was doing that miserable November thing where it couldn't commit to being actual rain. Just hung in the air as a general atmosphere of wet and cold. The kind of weather that felt like it had opinions about you specifically. Nora had been on her feet since 4:45 a.m., She would be on her feet until 9 p.m. She didn't think about that too hard. Because if she thought about it too hard, she would think about the stack of paper on the kitchen table 6 blocks away. And thinking about that stack of paper was something she saved for the 15 minutes between getting home and falling asleep. She had gotten very efficient about despair, very precise. Despair from 9:15 to 9:30. Sleep from 9:30 onward. Repeat. The paper stack was from Lenox Hill Hospital, 247,000 dues. Give or take Owen's bills. Owen Calloway was 19 years old and Nora's younger brother, and the only person on earth she would die for without thinking about it. Which was inconvenient. Because dying for someone, it turned out, was expensive even when nobody actually died. He had been admitted 8 weeks ago with what the hematology team called idiopathic hemolytic failure, which was a long technical way of saying, his blood is destroying itself, and we don't know why. The doctors were careful with her. Careful in the way doctors are when they want to be honest but are afraid of being sued. They said words like complex and atypical and further investigation required. They never said we've seen this before, because they hadn't. They never said we know how to fix it, because they didn't. Owen had insurance. Bad insurance. The kind that covered 2 aspirins and a thought and prayer. Nora had 2 jobs. This one. And 4 nights a week at a bar in Park Slope called Margot's, where she poured beer and smiled, and came home smelling like someone else's Friday night. She had $247,000 in debt, and a brother who kept trying to joke about it on Wednesday afternoons. He called his condition the vibes issue. He told her not to worry. He told her to eat something. Did she eat something? She looked thin. She needed to eat something. 19 years old and sick and worrying about her. She loved him so much it made her teeth hurt. The espresso machine gurgled ominously. Don't, Nora said. It hissed. I mean it. 3 seconds of nothing. Then a sound like a dying animal. Then it stopped working entirely. Nora closed her eyes, counted to 4, opened them. Her shift manager, Deb, was already looking at her from across the counter with the expression of a woman who had seen everything and was currently very tired of all of it. The 6 o'clock crowd, Deb said, I know, 40 minutes. I know, Deb. Because last time, Deb, I'm just saying, I will fix the machine, Nora said, in the very calm voice she used when she was 20 seconds from not being calm at all. Right now, please go away. Deb went away. Nora looked at the machine. The machine looked back at her. She opened the portafilter housing, cleared the blockage, reset the pressure valve, and spoke to it quietly for a moment in terms she would not repeat in polite company. It worked. Of course it worked. Everything always worked just long enough to keep her exactly where she was. By 3 in the afternoon, the rain had gotten serious about itself. Real rain now, coming in sideways off the harbor, making the gutters run fast. The yellow cabs through the front window looked like blurry watercolors. The blackthorn was warm and low-lit and smelled like cardamom and wet wool. The afternoon crowd had thinned to 4 regulars and a man at the corner table, who had been nursing the same drip coffee for 2 hours while reading what appeared to be an actual physical newspaper. Nora was wiping down the espresso machine for the 4th time. Not because it needed it. Because her hands needed something to do. She was thinking about the billing department call that morning. The one where the woman said payment plan options in the specific tone people use when they mean there are no good options, only bad ones and worse ones. She was thinking about Owen's face last Wednesday. How he'd been paler. How he'd been trying not to show it. She was thinking about the fact that she hadn't eaten since 7 a.m., and it was now. The door opened, and Nora stopped thinking about anything. Not gradually. Not the way attention shifts when something catches your eye. Instantly. Like a switch thrown. Like the sound dropping out of a room, which was actually what happened, the ambient noise of the blackthorn, rain against glass, low murmur of conversations, the gurgle of the fixed machine. It didn't fade. It cut. 1 second it was there, the next it wasn't. Just a silence so complete it felt pressurized. The kind of silence that exists in the moment between lightning and thunder. And then cold. A drop in temperature so sudden and total that Nora's next breath came out visible. A small white cloud in the air in front of her face. Inside a heated coffee shop. In November, the man who had walked through the door did not look like he belonged to the same city as everyone else in the room. Not the same decade. He wore a charcoal suit, not expensive in the obvious way, but in the way that made you understand that whoever made it had taken their time. His dark hair was wet from the rain, pushed back from his forehead. His skin was pale in a way that was not pallor and not illness. more like marble, the kind of pale that has never been in a hurry to explain itself. Tall. Still. Moving through the tables toward the counter with the quiet certainty of someone who has never once wondered whether there would be space for them. The four regulars at their separate tables all shifted slightly. Without looking up, just moved. Made room. The way people do around someone they can't name but can feel. Nora's hands stopped moving on the counter. He reached the register, and he looked at her. His eyes were amber, not brown amber. Not the muddy hazel that people sometimes call amber to be poetic, genuine amber. Old whiskey held up to a light source. And when those eyes locked onto hers, his entire body changed. Not dramatically. Subtly. The way a person changes when they open a door, expecting an empty room, and find something else entirely. His posture shifted. His shoulders drew back. He took a breath, slow and deep and slightly ragged at the edges. The way you breathe when you've been holding it for a very long time without realizing. His pupils expanded. Almost completely, and until the amber was just a ring around an enormous dark center. He stared at her. She stared back, and then nothing. His face smoothed out. Every muscle deliberately resettled into something polished and impassive and controlled. The way you reset a room after someone's been through it. What can I get you? Nora asked. Her voice came out steady. She was surprised by that. Coffee, he said. Black, low, unhurried, and something underneath the words. Not quite an accent, not quite a cadence, she recognized. Something old. Something that belonged to another century and was merely visiting this one. She turned to pull the shot. Her hands were shaking. Fine motor tremor. The kind that happens when your nervous system knows something your brain is still catching up to. She reached for the paper cup beside his, the Americano that had been sitting too long, the steam already fading, and her elbow caught the edge of it. The cup went over, 16 ounces of very hot coffee, directly into the front of his suit. She heard herself make a sound, not a word, just a sound. I'm so sorry. She grabbed the brown paper napkins from the holder, already moving out from behind the counter, pressing them against his chest, and her bare fingers closed around his hand where he was reaching for the napkins. The shock snapped between them like a whip crack, actual electricity, actual pain. A white bright spark at the point of contact that made her yelp and jerk her hand back. He caught her wrist, not grabbing, not rough, but absolute. His grip was a fact, like a doorframe, like something load-bearing, and his hand was cold, not cold the way hands get cold in winter. Cold the way stone is cold when it's been in the shade for years. Cold with a depth to it. A permanence, don't apologize, he said, very quietly. Like the words cost him something. She looked up at him, and his face, for one fraction of a second, before he got it back under control, was not the face of a man who had coffee spilled on him. It was the face of a man who had just heard music he'd forgotten existed, open and wrecked and so deeply, privately relieved that it almost hurt to look at. Then it was gone. Hey, Deb's voice from behind the counter, sharpened to a point. Let go of her arm right now. He released her wrist immediately, stepped back, looked down at his ruined suit. Then back at Nora, he reached into his breast pocket and placed something on the counter. Then he turned and walked out into the rain and was gone before the door had finished swinging shut. Nora looked at the counter, a coin. Heavy and gold and worn so smooth at the edges it felt almost liquid. Stamped on one side, a profile she vaguely recognized as imperial, surrounded by text she couldn't read at a glance. Latin, she picked it up, turned it over, breathed. On the back, scratched deep into the surface with something sharp and old, an open eye. 3 roses. Thorns wound around the stems like wire, the exact same image she had seen through a crack in a hospital room door when she was 11 years old. The exact same image inked on the inside of her dead mother's wrist. She didn't tell Deb what she was doing. She just said she needed her break early, grabbed her jacket from the hook by the back door, and walked out into the rain with the coin in her fist. Graves and Whitmore Antiquities on West 46th Street did not look like a place where extraordinary things happened. It looked like a place where time had quietly given up and decided to sit down for a while. The window display hadn't changed in what appeared to be several decades. The bell above the door sounded like it had opinions. The carpet was the particular shade of burgundy that suggested it had absorbed a significant portion of the 20th century. Edmund Graves was behind the counter, 70 years old. Built like someone who had started out larger and been gradually compacted by decades of dealing with things that didn't want to be dealt with. Reading glasses on a chain, a magnifying loupe on a velvet pad beside him. Hands that moved with the careful deliberateness of someone who understood that most things, once broken, do not fully come back. He looked at her over his glasses when she came in. She put the coin on the counter without preamble. He looked at it, then he picked up the loop. And then he was quiet for a very long time. Rain ticked against the window. Somewhere in the back, a clock marked the seconds. Nora watched him turn the coin, examine the edge, the face, the reverse. 2 minutes. 3. He set the loop down. "Where did you get this?" he asked. His voice had changed. Lost something. The professional flatness people used to manage strangers had been replaced by something quieter. "More careful. A customer left it," she said. As a tip, he looked at her over his glasses. The look of a man deciding whether a lie is worth addressing. "Is it real?" she asked. He let out a slow breath. "Real." He said the word like she'd asked him if the ocean was damp. "This is a Dutch ducat. Minted 1526, reign of Charles V standard issue for the period in every way except 3. He held it under the magnifying lamp, the gold purity. Whatever process produced this metal was not available to any royal mint operating in the 16th century. The ratio is wrong for the era. Too high, too clean. He turned it to the reverse. The engraving on the back, this eye, these roses, done at time of minting or very shortly after. The oxidation inside the tool marks is consistent with the base metal. You cannot fake that. Not without equipment that would cost more than the coin is worth. He set it down gently. And the weight. Heavier than it should be by approximately 4%. I've seen 2 other pieces in 30 years with this specific weight discrepancy. Both came from the same private collection. Whose collection? He looked at her for a moment. "A man named Vincent Hale," he said. "Hale Meridian Group. Park Avenue." He paused. "Let that sit. People do not accidentally leave artifacts from Vincent Hale's personal collection as gratuities. That's not how this works. If you found this somewhere, if you took it from somewhere, return it. The kind of resources that man has access to are not resources that express themselves through lawyers." Nora looked at the coin, at the eye, the roses. "The thorns, what's it worth?" she asked. "To a museum. 80, 90,000, depending on the institution." He paused. "To a private buyer who understands the specific provenance of that crest. Considerably more. Potentially without a ceiling." She picked up the coin. "I need the address," she said. "I just told you that is not a good idea, I know." The address, he wrote it on a card, slid it across the counter, watched her tuck it into her jacket pocket. "That symbol on the back," she said. "The eye and the roses. Do you know what it means?" He was quiet for a moment. "It's been associated with several private societies over the centuries. Nothing conclusive. Nothing I'd stake a professional opinion on." He looked at her carefully. "Why?" She thought about her mother's wrist. "About the wall in room 14B, about when he finds you, don't run. No reason," she said, and she walked out into the rain. The lobby of the Hale Meridian building on Park Avenue did not welcome you. It processed you. There was a difference. The marble floor was the color of old bone. The security grid consisted of double turnstile barriers, a biometric panel, and 2 men in dark suits near the far wall who stood with the particular stillness of people trained to move very quickly when stillness stopped being appropriate. The receptionist's name was Petra Sinclair. She had the kind of composure that is not natural but achieved. The way a diamond is achieved, through sustained pressure applied over a long period of time. She was on a call when Nora approached the desk. Held up one finger without looking up, finished her sentence, set the phone down, looked at Nora, looked at her jacket, which was damp, her shoes, which were wet, her general appearance, which suggested someone who had come directly from somewhere that was not this building and had not prepared for this building in any way. "Can I help you?" Petra said, in a tone that meant the opposite. Nora put the coin on the marble desk. The sound it made was solid, heavy, rung for the space in a way that made the nearest security guard look over. Petra looked at the coin. Something happened to her composure. Not a crack exactly, more like a hairline fracture, invisible to most people. Not to Nora, who had spent 3 years watching faces across a counter, for signs of what they actually wanted versus what they were going to order. Petra picked up her phone, spoke 4 words, too quietly for Nora to catch, then listened. Then set the phone down. 53rd floor, she said. Her voice had changed. The processed neutrality replaced by something that might have been, if you were being uncharitable, the early stages of fear. The private elevator is unlocked for you. The ride took less than 20 seconds. It felt much longer. The doors opened onto a floor that seemed to operate by different rules than the rest of the building. No fluorescent overhead lighting. No open-plan cubicles. Deep shadows in the corners even though it was mid-afternoon and the windows ran floor to ceiling. The glass was tinted so dark that outside was reduced to a smear of gray and amber books. More books than she had expected. Floor-to-ceiling shelving along 2 full walls, and the books were not decoration. They were used, many of them, spines cracked and pages marked with slips of paper in colors that had faded with age, a desk the size of a dining table. Completely clean except for a single object. A small obsidian figure of a woman in a long dress, her head bowed, both hands pressed flat against her thighs. And by the far window, his back to her, looking out at what remained of the daylight through the dark glass. Vincent Hale, he had changed his suit. Of course he had. This one was black. Fitted the same way the last one had been fitted, with the kind of precision that does not allow for imprecision. He held a glass of something dark red in his right hand. He had not turned around. "You should not have come here," he said. "Not who are you or how did you get up here, just that." Quiet, resigned. The voice of someone who had been half expecting this and had not fully decided how to feel about it. "You left your coin," she said. "I know I did. It's worth 6 figures. I know that also. You left it deliberately." He turned around. In the dim light, his face was all angles and shadows, and that unnatural pallor that had been noticeable in the coffee shop, but now, without the fluorescence, without the normalizing effect of a public space, seemed more pronounced, more obvious. His amber eyes caught the low light of the desk lamp and held it in a way that eyes should not hold light. He looked at her, and there it was again, that thing that had happened in the coffee shop. That brief, private collapse and reconstruction. Faster now, better controlled. But she had seen it once and knew what to look for. "How do you know that symbol?" he asked. "You first." Something moved across his face. Not amusement exactly, recognition. Like he had been expecting pushback and had decided that was appropriate. He set his glass down, moved to the chair beside the desk, not behind it, beside it, which she noticed, and sat down slowly. "Sit," he said. "I'll stand, as you prefer." He looked at the coin in her hand. "That crest belongs to a bloodline. A specific lineage that has existed in various forms, since before records were kept in any language you would recognize. The eye and the 3 roses are its mark. They appear in manuscripts, on coins, on objects that seem to have no reason to be connected, and yet they are." He paused. "It is not a family crest in the conventional sense. It is more like a signature, left by the same source across centuries." "What source?" He looked at her steadily. "A soul," he said. "One specific soul, reborn at long intervals. In a different body each time, a different century, a different life. The women who carry this soul don't always know what they are. Most of them don't. They feel a weight they can't explain. A sense of something unfinished. They sometimes have memories that don't belong to any version of their life they can account for." He stopped. "Your mother knew, or she came to know." "That's unusual." Nora said nothing. She was very carefully not reacting to anything he was saying. Unusual, she thought, was one word for it. "And what is it?" she asked. "This soul. What does it do? Why does it matter?" He was quiet for a moment. "It carries something rare at the biological level," he said. "A genetic signature, call it a marker, that occurs nowhere else in the human population. The women who carry this soul carry this marker. And that marker, in the correct circumstances, has a very specific effect on those whose biology is not." He paused, chose his next word carefully. "Human in the conventional sense." She stared at him. "What are you?" He looked at her for a long moment, and then her phone buzzed in her jacket pocket. She almost didn't look at it. But something, instinct, the particular vibration pattern of the hospital notification app, made her pull it out. Lenox Hill Hospital patient portal, automated alert patient, Owen Calloway. Discharged, against medical advice, authorization code, vein 51. Time, 14:32. The room tilted, not literally. But the floor felt less certain than it had. "Owen," she said. Not to Vincent, to herself, to the phone. To the particular fear that had lived in her chest for weeks and had just found a new and worse shape to take. They discharged him. He can't be discharged, he's not. She dialed Owen's cell, straight to voicemail. She dialed the nurse's station on his floor. 11 rings. Nobody answered. "Miss Calloway." Vincent's voice was different. The careful, measured quality was still there, but something underneath it had sharpened. Something ancient and alert. He was standing now. She hadn't seen him move. "My brother is at that hospital," she said, and her voice was very controlled, which was impressive because she felt the opposite of controlled. He has a blood condition that nobody can explain. And he is 19 years old, and someone just discharged him with an authorization code that is not from any of his doctors, and I can't reach him. And I need you to tell me right now what is happening." Vincent crossed to the window, the dark window. He reached up and drew back a panel of heavy curtains she hadn't noticed, and through the glass, 53 floors down, across 6 blocks, visible because the rain had thinned for a moment and the angle was specific, you'd have to know what you were looking for. A white ambulance with no logo was pulling away from the curb in front of Lenox Hill Hospital, moving quietly. No lights, no sirens. Vincent watched it. "Vane 59, he said quietly. "Dorian Vane. Who is Dorian Vane?" His jaw had set. The line of his shoulders had changed. Not stiffened exactly, settled. The way something settles when it stops pretending to be at rest and acknowledges what it actually is. He turned to face her, and she watched it happen. Watched the careful human performance he had been maintaining since she walked in begin to drop away. Layer by layer. Like clothing being set aside before something that requires the full use of the body. His eyes brightened. The amber intensified. Became luminous in the low light the way an animal's eyes catch a beam in the dark. And his upper lip drew back, 2 elongated canines, white, precise. Inhuman Nora did not scream. She didn't run. She took 3 steps back until her shoulders hit the bookshelves. Put the coin in her jacket pocket and breathed in out. "Okay," she thought. "Okay, that's... Okay, Owen doesn't have a blood condition," Vincent said. His voice was the same, low and measured and unhurried, which was somehow worse than if it had changed. "His body is rejecting a genetic marker present in your blood, a marker it shares at a partial level. The rejection causes hemolytic symptoms. It presents as a blood disorder. It is not. What is it? His immune system fighting something it has never encountered before and doesn't have a framework to process." He held her gaze. "Your bloodline, what you carry, is called the prima anima. It reincarnates every few centuries in a new vessel. Your mother recognized it in you. She understood what it meant. She spent 12 years making herself appear unstable so that people looking for you would look past her and not find you." Nora's mouth was dry. "The people looking for me," she said. "Dorian Vane has been tracking the prima anima for 300 years. When he determined you had returned, had been reborn, in this life, in this body, he needed confirmation. Owen's blood carries enough of the secondary marker to confirm the lineage. That's why Owen is sick." A pause. "It's also why Dorian took him. Owen is bait, Miss Calloway. He is not the target. You are the white ambulance, no logo, moving quietly through the rain." She looked at Vincent, at the fangs, which he had not retracted, at the amber eyes, at the 500-year-old coin she could feel the weight of through her jacket pocket. "When he finds you, don't run." "Where did they take him?" she asked. "Yonkers," he said. "There is a facility. Industrial district. It presents as a cold storage complex. It is not," he paused. "I know exactly where it is. How long do we have? If Dorian intends to confirm the genetic match and begin the extraction protocol." He stopped. "Hours. Less. If his team is already prepared." She looked at him for a long moment. "What do you want from me?" she said. "Don't say nothing. You came to the coffee shop. You left the coin. You're not doing this out of..." She stopped. Started again. "What do you want?" He was quiet. And then he said, very quietly, something she did not expect. "I want to fix what I failed to fix a very long time ago." She looked at his face. He was not performing. She had watched faces for 3 years across a coffee counter, and she knew what performing looked like, and this was not it. This was something old and tired and entirely serious. "My brother first," she said. "Everything else after." "Yes," he said. "If you're lying to me..." "I know," he said. "I know." He moved to the desk. Opened a drawer and retrieved something he slid into his coat pocket without showing her. She caught the dark glint of a handle, something bladed, the shape of it wrong for anything standard. He looked at her. And, for the first time since she had walked into this building, he looked like what he was. Not the billionaire. Not the man in the expensive suit. Something else. Something that had survived 5 centuries by being the thing everything else in the world had learned to be afraid of. "Stay close," he said. "And when I tell you to do something..." "I'll decide that when you tell me," she said. He looked at her, and something crossed his face. Not surprise, more like recognition. The way you look at a word in another language that turns out to have the same root as one you already know. "Yes," he said. "All right." He led her to the elevator. And somewhere in the rain-gray city, 6 miles north, Owen Calloway was lying in the back of a windowless vehicle, with an authorization code stamped on his discharge papers that no one in the hospital had questioned. Because the man behind that code had spent 3 centuries making sure that people didn't question him. Nora looked at her phone one more time. No signal, she put it in her pocket. The elevator doors opened. She walked in. Bruges, 1533, not Amsterdam. Not the story everyone tells. A different city, a different winter. The same man. Vincent is standing in a cellar beneath a church on the Berg Square. Stone walls, candlelight so thin it barely qualifies as light. The kind of cold that lives in old stone and never fully leaves it no matter what season arrives above. A young woman sits at a wooden table, writing with a quill, unhurried, precise. The scratch of the nib against parchment is the only sound in the room. Brown hair pinned back simply. A small scar above her left eyebrow from something she never fully explained, and on her left palm, running diagonal from the base of her thumb to her wrist, a scar. Old and fully healed and so familiar to Vincent that the sight of it is like a key turning in a lock he had forgotten he was carrying. She looks up, smiles. Not surprised, not startled. Smiles the way you smile when someone arrives who is always going to arrive. Eventually, "You're late," she says. "I know," he says. "You're always late, I know that too." She folds the parchment, holds it out to him. He takes it, doesn't open it. Just holds it. "Don't make promises," she says. "That time hasn't agreed to yet." He looks at the scar on her palm. She closes her hand. "Sit with me," she says. While we still have time, the candle between them burns and burns. And then the image begins to fade at the edges, softening, dissolving, going dark. Yonkers, 2025. 6:47 p.m. The vehicle they took from the Hale Meridian building was not a helicopter, which Nora had been half expecting a helicopter, because of course she had. Because the last 2 hours of her life had been so thoroughly unlike anything she had ever experienced that her brain had apparently decided to just start making assumptions based on movie logic. No, helicopter, a car, black, German. Unremarkable from the outside, in the way that very expensive things are often unremarkable from the outside. Vincent drove himself. This was the first detail that surprised her. The second was that he drove like a normal person. Both hands on the wheel, eyes on the road. Observing traffic signals, she had spent 11 minutes in that car staring at his hands on the steering wheel, trying to reconcile what she knew she had seen. The fangs, the eyes, the inhuman stillness, with the entirely mundane spectacle of an ancient supernatural creature waiting patiently at a red light on the FDR drive. He had said almost nothing. She had said almost nothing, which was unusual for Nora. Nora, who had learned early in life that silence left too much room for the bad thoughts to stretch out and get comfortable. But something about the quality of his silence didn't invite filling. It wasn't the silence of someone withholding. It was the silence of someone who had learned, over a very long time, that most words are approximations of the real thing. And approximations have a cost. She watched the rain on the passenger window. She thought about Owen, about his face last Wednesday, about the way he had pretended to be fine when he was very clearly not fine. About how 19-year-olds are so bad at pretending to be fine, and so convinced they are pulling it off. She thought about the word Vane, Dorian Vane, the authorization code, the white ambulance with no logo. She thought, someone planned this, and then someone planned this for a long time. And then she stopped thinking, because the thinking was making the fear bigger, and the fear was not useful right now. "Tell me about Dorian Vane," she said. Vincent was quiet for a moment. "The kind of moment that isn't hesitation. Is something more deliberate than hesitation old?" he said. "Older than most. Which matters in our world because age is not merely time. It is accumulation of strength, of knowledge. Of the particular kind of patience that comes from having watched everything you feared would eventually happen anyway." He paused. He has spent the last 3 centuries building what appears, from the outside, to be a legitimate private equity operation. Medical research, pharmaceutical logistics, cold chain distribution, cold chain, Nora said, temperature-controlled storage and transport networks, global, extremely well-funded, another pause. The infrastructure has 2 purposes. The legitimate one that the financial regulators see. And the other one, she didn't ask about the other one yet. Move to, how long has he been looking for me since he confirmed the cycle? Since he understood what the prima anima actually is at the biological level, Vincent's hand stayed steady on the wheel. 300 years of searching. He's come close before. Twice. Both times the women he found died before the process could be completed. What process? Silence, Vincent? The marker in your blood, he said. The genetic signature of the prima anima. It has a specific effect on our biology. In sufficient concentration, introduced correctly, it resets certain cellular mechanisms that govern our relationship to ultraviolet radiation. She translated this. It lets you walk in daylight. Yes. She let that sit for a moment. And Owen carries the secondary marker, partial. Perhaps 40% of the full sequence. Enough to confirm the lineage. Enough for Dorian's team to attempt a reverse engineering process. He stopped. When he continued, something in his voice was careful in a new way. Not enough for the process to succeed. But they won't know that until they've tried. She understood what he meant by tried. She turned back to the window. How much further? She said. 8 minutes. She looked at her phone. Still no signal. Owen's number still going to voicemail. Lenox Hill Nurses Station still ringing out. 8 minutes. She could survive 8 minutes. She had been surviving things for 24 years. The industrial district in South Yonkers at 7 in the evening in November looked exactly like the kind of place where nothing good had ever happened, and nobody had ever expected it to. Warehouses. Concrete. Sodium lights on tall poles making orange pools in the rain. Forklifts parked at angles. A smell of diesel and iron and something chemical underneath that Nora couldn't name. They parked 2 blocks from the facility, which looked, from the outside, exactly like what it was supposed to look like. A cold storage complex. 3 large warehouse buildings connected by enclosed walkways. A loading bay on the north end. A chain-link perimeter with a single manned gate. Normal, functional, utterly boring. Except for the guard at the gate who was standing too straight and watching too many things at once. That was not the posture of a rent-a-cop working a cold storage warehouse on a Tuesday evening. That was the posture of someone expecting something. And the camera placement, 3 visible. Nora spotted 2 more that were trying not to be spotted. 5 cameras, she said. Vincent looked at her sideways. I work in a coffee shop, she said. We got robbed twice. I learned to count cameras. He said nothing. But something in his expression shifted by approximately 2 degrees. How do we get Owen out? She said. The entry system on the east side of the primary building runs on a biometric protocol. Blood-based. Dorian designed it around the prima anima signature because he intended to use it to lock down the facility once he had you inside. A pause. He didn't anticipate you using it to get in on your own terms. My blood opens the door, yes, and then? Then I handle the interior. She looked at the facility. At the lights. At the guard, handle, she said. Yes, how many people are inside? Unknown. Estimates between 8 and 15, she processed this okay, she said. And once we're in? Find Owen. Get him to the east exit. I will, he stopped. Handle it, she finished. Yes, she looked at him. When this is over, she said. You're going to tell me everything. Not the version where you decide what I need to know. Everything. He met her eyes. Yes, he said. And this time it meant, I know I owe you that. I have known it for a long time. Okay, she said, and got out of the car. The east side of the facility was the least lit, the most exposed. 30 feet of open ground between the fence line and the building wall. The fence had seen better decades, but was still a fence. Vincent went through it. Not over. Through. His hands found the chain link at shoulder height and pulled. And the metal parted the way fabric parts, when you know where the seam is, and you apply pressure in the right direction. Nora went through the gap. Did not think about the fact that she had just watched a man pull apart a chain-link fence with his hands. She was developing a very efficient system of processing things she couldn't yet afford to fully feel. The 4 guards on the south perimeter, she heard them before she saw them. Boots on wet concrete, the low crackle of radios. She could see the east door from where they were crouched, in the shadow of the drainage infrastructure. 40 feet of open space between them and it, and the 4 guards between them and that space. She opened her mouth. Vincent was already moving. And this was the thing. She had thought she was prepared. She had seen the fangs. She had felt the cold of his hand. She had processed intellectually that this was not a human person in the conventional sense. She was not prepared. He didn't run. Running implies a sequence of movements. A before and after. This was more like relocation. Like a film where a single frame has been removed so the subject simply occupies a different position without the intervening travel. 3 seconds. Maybe 4 heavily armed guards, all down. She had not heard gunshots, not screaming. She had heard almost nothing. The muffled crunch of something structural, a sound like a very large book dropped from a height. Twice. And then Vincent was standing at the east door, waiting for her, hands at his sides, breathing steady, suit jacket slightly more damaged than it had been. That was all. Nora walked across the 30 feet of open ground. 1 step. 2, very aware of her own breathing, very aware of her feet on wet concrete. The guards were breathing. She checked with a quick glance as she passed the nearest one. Breathing. Just not awake. She reached the door. Beside it, a panel. Black glass. A faint red glow from within. She raised her right hand, which was shaking. Which she acknowledged and set aside. She pressed her palm to the glass, the panel hummed. And then a needle, very thin, very fast, from a mechanism she hadn't seen, pricked the center of her palm. She gasped. Pulled back slightly. A single bead of blood welled up and smeared across the glass surface. And then a flash, not vision, not imagination, memory. But not her memory, a cellar. Stone walls, candlelight, a wooden table. Her own hands, but not her hands, narrower. The skin different, the nails shaped differently. Pressing a folded piece of parchment flat against the table surface. The scratch of a quill. The smell of tallow candle and cold stone. The city outside is Bruges. She knows that the way you know things in dreams, without having been told, the year is 1533. And she is sitting across a table from a man whose face she would know in any century. Then it was gone. She was in Yonkers. In the rain. Her palm against a biometric panel. The light went from red to green. Hydraulic locks released, with a sound like something old and very heavy deciding to let go. The door opened. She looked at Vincent. He was watching her with an expression she hadn't seen on him before. Careful and still, and underneath that, cracked open in some way, like a fault line under a road, invisible until exactly the right pressure. Bruges, she said. His jaw tightened. Yes, that was me. Yes. She had approximately 400 questions about this. She put them all aside. Owen first, she said, and went inside. The interior of the facility smelled wrong, sterile, in one layer, chemical, bleach and ozone, and the sharp particular bite of industrial refrigerant. But underneath that, something organic and metallic that no amount of antiseptic could fully cover. Blood. Old and recent both, the corridor was white tile and fluorescent tube lighting, and it stretched ahead of them to a junction 40 feet in, completely still. No visible personnel, which was wrong. With 4 guards outside and 5 cameras on the exterior, and a biometric entry system that cost more than Nora made in a decade, there should be interior personnel. There should be sound. Movement, there was nothing. Vincent stopped her with one hand flat across her sternum. She stopped, they both listened. He heard things she didn't. She understood this implicitly. The way you understand that the dog at the end of the street has processed information about the neighborhood that you simply don't have access to. Second level, he said quietly. Below us. Stairs at the junction. They moved him down, down. She moved. He caught the back of her jacket. Behind me, he said. He's my brother. I know that. Behind me, she fell in behind him. 1 step. Because he was right and she knew it, and she was also not going to say so out loud. The junction. Left. A corridor leading to the loading bay. Right. A stairwell door. Restricted access. Offers personal only. Below that, in smaller text, a second designation she didn't recognize. 2 words. Project anima. Her blood. Her blood was a project. She put that one away for later, too. The storage system was getting crowded. The stairwell was concrete and bare fluorescent, and the smell got worse going down. More metallic. More real. The door at the bottom opened onto a room much larger than the footprint above suggested. And Nora stopped in the doorway and made herself breathe. The room was a laboratory. Clinical. Expensive. The kind of expensive that is not about aesthetics, but about precision. Every surface designed to be easily cleaned, every fixture positioned for maximum utility, every light source calibrated to a specific spectrum. Along the right wall. 4 cylindrical glass tanks, roughly the height of a person, each filled with a clear viscous fluid. 3 of them contained. She looked away from those. She looked away. In the center of the room, Owen, on a tilted steel table. Restrained at the wrists and ankles with broad leather straps. A central venous catheter placed in his chest. She recognized it from the hospital. From the week, they had placed one for treatment access, but this one wasn't for treatment. Tubing ran from it to a centrifuge unit the size of a large chest freezer. The centrifuge was running. She could hear the hum of it from the doorway. Steady. Purposeful. Owen's skin was the color of old newspaper. His lips were faintly blue at the edges. But his eyes were open. He saw her, Nora. His voice was almost nothing. Thin and rough and coming from very far away. Why is it so cold? She crossed the room. Fast. Not running. Running would mean she was panicking, and she was not panicking. She was functioning. There was a difference. She needed there to be a difference right now. She grabbed the nearest surgical tray and hit the centrifuge housing with it. The housing cracked. She hit it again. And again, Miss Calloway. A technician in a hazard suit, backing toward the far wall, hands up. "Turn it off," she said. He didn't move. She looked at him. And she understood something in that moment about herself that she hadn't known before. That there is a version of calm that exists on the far side of fear. That is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move through it. That her mother had probably felt this. That her mother had probably felt exactly this. "Turn it off," she said again, very quietly. "Or I will find a way to turn it off that damages more than the housing." He turned it off, the hum died. She found the surgical shears on the instrument tray and cut through the restraints at Owen's wrists. Then his ankles. Then very carefully disconnected the catheter from the tubing. She pressed her hand flat against his chest where the line had been. "Owen, can you sit up, probably?" A pause. "Maybe. Try." He tried. He made it halfway. She got an arm under his shoulders and got him the rest of the way. He was lighter than he should have been. 8 weeks of being sick and eating hospital food, and she could feel how much weight he had lost, just in the way he moved against her arm. "You came," he said. "Obviously I came. I told them you'd come." A weak attempt at something like his normal voice. "The guys who brought me here," I said. "My sister is going to come here, and she is going to be very unhappy with all of you, Owen." "I was right, though, Owen. I need you to focus." Focusing. He looked past her, saw Vincent standing at the far side of the room. "Who's the very tall, pale man?" "That's..." She stopped. "It's complicated. Can you stand? Define stand, weight on your feet." "Upright. Aiming for that." Yeah, she got him to his feet. He swayed. She held on. And from above them, from a mezzanine level she hadn't fully clocked when she came in, a raised observation platform accessible by a metal staircase on the far side of the room. A voice, calm, cultured. The cadence of someone who has spent a very long time being listened to and has stopped expecting anything else. "I have to say," Dorian Vane said, "I expected this to take longer." He came down the stairs slowly, not because he needed to, because he chose to, because the descent was itself a communication. "I am not rushing. I am not concerned. You are inside my facility, within my perimeter, and I have all the time I need." Dorian Vane was not what Nora had expected. She had expected something like Vincent, the contained intensity, the visible weight of centuries. He was different, older looking, in the way that wasn't age but something that had weathered the face from inside. Silver hair, short, precisely cut. A white suit that had no business being white inside a working laboratory. Crimson eyes. Not the amber of Vincent's, darker, deeper, the color of old wine or old blood. A face that had learned a long time ago to arrange itself into whatever expression was most useful. Right now it was arranging itself into something like regret. The boy's sequencing came back as expected, Dorian said. He reached the floor level, stopped 10 feet away, looking at Owen with the specific dispassionate attention of someone evaluating an instrument that didn't perform as hoped. Partial match. Insufficient for full synthesis. He shifted his gaze to Nora. "I want you to understand that I didn't bring him here to harm him. I brought him here because I needed you to come to me. And now I'm here," Nora said. "Now you're here." He tilted his head. "And you brought Vincent, which I also expected. You're going to let Owen go," she said. "Of course," he said, easily. Too easily. "The boy is no further use to me. Then open the door and let him walk out. I will." In a moment, he took one step forward. "I'd like to speak with you first. Without the performance. Without whatever version of events Vincent has given you." She said nothing. "He told you about the prima anima," Dorian said. "The genetic marker, the daylight effect. The 5-century search." He paused. "Did he tell you about Bruges?" Her jaw tightened. "He told you something," Dorian said. "You have that look. The look of someone holding new information they haven't finished processing." He moved one more step. "Did he tell you that the woman in Bruges chose to die? That she made that choice deliberately and specifically?" "Stop," Vincent said. His voice from across the room had a new quality, something compressed. Something that had been still for a long time and was reconsidering that. "She's going to hear this eventually," Dorian said, without looking at him. Still looking at Nora. The woman in Bruges understood what her blood could do. She understood that if Vincent used it, if he was given the daylight immunity he had been searching for, the balance would shift. He would no longer need to hide. He would no longer need to operate within the constraints of the masquerade. He paused. She didn't want that for him. Not because she didn't love him. Because she did. She understood what he would become if he stopped being afraid of the sun. Silence, Owen, against Nora's side, was very still. Listening, she made a choice, Dorian said. And Vincent let her make it. He stood in the doorway of that cellar, and he did not stop her, a beat. He has been telling himself for 500 years that he respected her autonomy. That it was love, that it was the right thing. He tilted his head. Consider the possibility that it was something simpler. That he was afraid. That he has been afraid every time. That the reason he keeps finding this soul and losing it is not fate or tragedy. It is a pattern. Of a man who gets to the threshold and doesn't cross it. Nora looked at Vincent. Vincent was looking at Dorian, and his face was controlled, completely controlled. In a way that told her exactly how much force that control was requiring, I think, Nora said, that you're a man who has spent 300 years convincing yourself that what you want and what is right are the same thing. She kept her voice level. And I think you brought my brother here to scare me into complying with whatever you actually want, which is my blood. And I think you're trying to undermine my trust in Vincent, because a frightened and isolated woman is easier to manipulate than one with an ally. Dorian looked at her. For the first time since he'd come down the stairs, his expression shifted. Not dramatically, but the arrangement of his features recalibrated by a fraction. Smart, he said. Let my brother go, I told you I would. Then do it now, and then Dorian moved, not at Nora, at Owen fast. Fast in the way Vincent was fast. The reallocation, the removal of the intervening steps. But Dorian was older. And older was faster. He had Owen by the collar before she could fully process that he had crossed the distance. I changed my mind. Dorian said. Everything happened simultaneously. Owen grabbed Dorian's wrist with both hands. Not to break the grip, to be a weight. Just enough delay. Nora was already moving to the terminal panel she had clocked on the right wall when she came in. Same black glass, same glow, same family as the entry panel. If her blood opened the building, if her genetic signature was the key the whole system was built around, then her blood could shut it down. She pressed her bleeding palm. Still bleeding from the entry panel, the small puncture wound still open. Flat against the terminal. Every light in the building went out. Every. Single. One, not a flicker, not a dimming. A complete and instantaneous severing of every powered system in the facility. The hum of the ventilation, the buzz of the fluorescents, the centrifuge that was already off, everything. Gone darkness so complete, it was almost tactile. And in that darkness, sound. The sound of Vincent moving. She had thought in the car that she had prepared herself, that she had processed what he was, that she had handled enough to be ready for whatever came next. She had not been ready for what he sounded like in the dark, without the visual to anchor him to something human. Just sound. The precise, efficient sound of a being that had survived half a millennium by being the thing other things feared. She held Owen against her side, pressed her back against the wall, breathed. The sounds lasted 40 seconds, then stopped. And in the silence, 2 pinpoints of amber light appeared in the darkness 10 feet to her left. Steady. Luminous. Coming closer. Owen is clear, Vincent said. Dorian is contained, not dead. We have limited time before he recovers the use of his limbs. How limited? 20 minutes. Possibly less. She felt Owen shift against her. Nora, Owen said. His voice was closer to normal now. Whatever shock response had been active was starting to rationalize itself into something functional. Or he was running on adrenaline. Either way, Nora. I have to tell you something. Not right now, Owen? No. Listen. He pulled back slightly. She couldn't see his face, just his voice in the dark. I've been having these dreams. The whole time I was in the hospital, every time I went under anesthesia. The same ones, Owen. A cellar, he said. Candles. A woman writing at a table, he paused. And him, the man across the room. He was there every time. He always had the same look on his face. Another pause. Nora. Mom knew him. Mom knew who he was. I don't know how I know that, but I know it. She was quiet. Mom knew him. When he finds you, don't run. She looked toward the amber light. Vincent said nothing. We need to leave, she said. Right now, she kept her arm around Owen. Followed the amber light toward the door. The east exit was still unlocked. They came out into the rain and the orange sodium light, and the smell of diesel and the relative enormity of a sky above them that went up and up in all directions without a ceiling. Owen looked up at it. He had not been outside in 8 weeks. She watched his face do something complicated. 3 breaths. 4. Okay, he said. More to himself than to her. Okay, the car was 2 blocks away. They moved through the shadows at the fence line. Past the guards, still down, still breathing. Around the perimeter. Out through the gap in the fence, nobody followed, nobody came. And Nora was just beginning to let herself think that they had actually done it. That Owen was actually upright and moving and breathing. That they were actually walking back to a car on a wet street in Yonkers at 7:30 on a Tuesday evening. Like three people who had just done something completely ordinary. She was just beginning to think that, when Owen stumbled, not badly. His foot caught on an uneven seam in the asphalt, and he went down to one knee, and she caught him, and he straightened up, shaking his head, saying, I'm fine, just... And he said, the woman at the table, the one in my dreams. She had Mom's hands. Nora stopped walking, the same scar, Owen said, on her palm. The diagonal one. Same place. She turned to look at him. He was looking at her with the particular expression of someone who has just said something they weren't sure they should say, and is now waiting to find out if they were right to say it. She looked at Vincent. Vincent was looking at the ground. And the line of his shoulders in the rain on a wet street in Yonkers was the line of a man who has carried something heavy for a very long time and has just been told that someone else can see the shape of it. Get in the car, she said. Quietly. They got in the car. She sat in the front. Owen in the back, reclined, eyes closed, breathing steadily. Vincent started the engine. She looked out the passenger window. She said, the woman in Bruges? Yes, tell me how she died. Long silence. Rain on the roof of the car? She prepared the means herself, he said. Before I arrived. She knew Dorian was coming. She knew what would happen if he took her. His voice was flat. Not the flatness of someone who doesn't feel it. The flatness of someone who has said this exact thing to himself so many times that the saying of it has become the only way to get through it. I arrived in time to sit with her, not in time to prevent it. Whether that was, he stopped. Whether that was accident or choice, Nora said. He said nothing. Dorian said you were afraid, that you've always been afraid. That you get to the threshold and don't cross it. Silence, is he right? The car moved through the rain. The lights of the city growing ahead of them. There is a version of that which is true, he said finally. I have stood at doors I should have walked through. I have made stillness into principle when it was actually fear, a pause. I don't know how to make that better. She looked at him, the profile of a face that had spent 5 centuries holding something she was only beginning to understand the weight of. You don't make it better by explaining it, she said. You make it better by doing something different next time. He looked at the road. Yes, he said. Behind them, in the back seat, Owen said very quietly, without opening his eyes. I like him. Owen, I'm just saying, go to sleep. Sleeping, a pause. He seems like he means it, though. Whatever it is, Nora looked out the window. The rain was letting up, just slightly. Enough that the road ahead became a little clearer. Enough that the lights of the city reflected off the wet surface of the highway. In long amber streaks going forward. Like something opening up, like something that had been closed for a long time beginning, very slowly, to open. They drove through the night, north on the Palisades, then east at the interchange. Then the long bridge across the water, the lights of the bridge cables running overhead in lines like something suspended. Owen slept, Vincent drove. Nora stayed awake and watched the road and held everything she was feeling at a careful distance and breathed steadily and did not fall apart, because falling apart was for later, when Owen was somewhere warm and safe and she had processed enough to know where to put all of it. The car came down off the bridge on the other side into Rhode Island, coastal roads. Trees on either side. The smell of salt water beginning to come through even the sealed windows. Vincent slowed as they turned onto a private road that ran along a cliff top. And through the darkness ahead, Nora could make out the shape of something large. Stone and glass and old money and serious security, and a view of the Atlantic that in daylight would be worth looking at. This is yours, she said. Yes, of course it is, she said. And then, when Owen is stable, when he's comfortable and the doctor has seen him and he's okay, she turned to look at Vincent directly. Then you're going to tell me everything, the whole thing. Starting from the beginning. Yes, he said. And I'm going to ask questions. Yes, and you're going to answer them. All of them. Not the version where you decide what I need to know. He looked at her. Yes, he said. All of it. The car turned through the gate. The Atlantic spread out below the cliff in the dark, wide and cold and ancient. Going further than the eye could reach, behind them, in Yonkers in the dark interior of a facility with no working power, Dorian Vane pulled himself out of the structural wreckage that had pinned him. He moved slowly. assessing. Fingers on his jaw where something had cracked and was stitching itself back together. He looked around the room, looked at the empty table where Owen had been, stood up straight, reached into his breast pocket and removed a phone. A different phone. The kind with no number registered to any network, no GPS signal, no record of its existence anywhere. He made one call. She went with him, he said. The pact hasn't happened yet. We still have a window. A pause. Wake Cornelia. Tell her the board needs to convene. Another pause. Tell her the girl touched the Bruges stone. She'll understand. He ended the call, stood in the darkness, looked at his hand. He had felt it through the contact point when Nora's blood hit the panel. Even from across the room, even through the distance. The signature of the prima anima activating, the specific resonance of it. Like a chord struck on an instrument he had been listening for across 3 centuries, it was everything he had calculated, and then some. He put the phone back in his pocket. Different approach, he said to no one, and walked toward the stairs. Newport, Rhode Island. 3:14 a.m. The house was called Harrow Point, which was not a comforting name. But then nothing about the last 12 hours had been comforting. So Nora decided to keep moving. The estate sat on a cliff above the Atlantic. Stone. Glass. 4 stories of it. Old money built it, clearly. Old money from before the kind of old money most people meant when they said old money. The kind of old money that predated the concept of money in its current form, and had simply found new containers for itself as the centuries required. Vincent had a doctor. Of course he had a doctor, Dr. Harriet Osei, 50s. Calm in the specific way of someone who had seen enough unusual things in this particular employment to have recalibrated her baseline of unusual some time ago. She met at them at the door with a medical bag that looked civilian, but had contents that were not entirely civilian. She looked at Owen for exactly 4 seconds before taking charge of him in a way that did not invite discussion. 3 pints, minimum, she said, feeling the pulse at Owen's wrist. Court when temp is low. Get him horizontal. She did not ask how he had come to be in this condition. Nora noted that Owen, for his part, had revived slightly in the car. The adrenaline or stubbornness, or the specific Owen Calloway quality of being annoyingly resilient when it was least convenient. He had started asking questions in the last 20 minutes of the drive that Nora had been unable to fully answer, so he's a... Owen had said. Yes. And you're a, sort of, and Mom? Owen, right, later. A pause. Is the house nice? At least the house was objectively extraordinary. She wasn't going to tell him that yet. She didn't want to reward the line of inquiry. Dr. Osei took Owen to the lower level. Nora started to follow. Let her work, Vincent said quietly. Beside her, she stopped. She stood in the entrance hall of Harrow Point at 3:14 in the morning and looked at the high stone ceiling and the walls of old books and the fire someone had clearly lit in the next room in preparation for their arrival. And she felt something she had not allowed herself to feel since the biometric panel beeped green in Yonkers. Her legs were unsteady. Just slightly. Just enough. She sat down on the bottom step of the main staircase, put her elbows on her knees, put her face in her hands, didn't cry, just breathed, long and slow and deliberate. Owen was here. Owen was breathing. Dr. Osei had that look of competent authority that was the medical equivalent of everything is going to be fine even when it isn't. Owen was going to be fine. She breathed in, out from across the entrance hall very quietly. There's tea in the library. If you want it. She didn't look up. Is it the kind of tea that has something in it that affects my judgment or my free will or my genetic destiny in any way? A beat. No, he said. It is ordinary tea. Someone on my staff made it approximately 20 minutes ago because they received word we were coming. Your staff knew we were coming. I have a large and efficient staff. Of course you do. She lifted her head. Fine. Tea. The library at Harrow Point occupied the entire east wing of the 2nd floor flume to ceiling shelves. A rolling ladder on a brass track. Deep chairs arranged around a fireplace was doing its job with conviction. And on the table between 2 of the chairs, a tray with a teapot and 2 cups and a plate of things to eat, because apparently Vincent Hale's efficient staff understood that Nora had not eaten since 7 a.m., and it was now closer to 4 a.m. And these were the kind of logistical details that large, efficient staffs were good at. She ate half the plate standing up before she sat down. Vincent sat across from her. Did not eat, did not take tea. Just sat with his hands on the arms of the chair and watched the fire the way someone watches something they haven't seen in a while. She ate, she drank the tea. It was ordinary tea. Then she put down the cup. The woman in Bruges, she said. Yes, Tell me the real version. Not what Dorian said, not the strategic version. The actual thing that happened, he was quiet for a moment. The fire moved. The Atlantic made itself known outside the windows as a presence more than a sound. A low, continuous percussion against the cliff below. Her name was Adela, he said. She was a copyist. She worked for the church in Bruges, transcribing documents that the clergy needed copied but didn't trust to the general scriptorium. He paused. She was the third time I had found the soul. By then I knew the cycle. I knew what the marker meant. I knew what Dorian was searching for. I found her before he did, barely. By 3 weeks, and I told her everything, the way I've told you. She listened. She asked precise questions. She was not frightened in the way most people are frightened by this information. She was more. He stopped, considered, annoyed. She said it explained certain things about her life that she had found inconvenient and wished someone had told her earlier. Nora almost smiled. Didn't quite. She had the eidetic traces, he said, the residual memories. She remembered more than any of the others, a name she couldn't place. The smell of the same candle in rooms she had never been in. He looked at the fire. We had 3 weeks. Dorian was coming. We both knew it. She understood what he would do if he took her. She understood what her blood could do in the wrong hands. A long pause. She made a choice. She found the means herself. Taxine, from the U in the churchyard, prepared correctly. She was thorough. She was always thorough, silence. And you arrived, Nora said. I arrived. She was still breathing. I could have. He stopped. You could have turned her, yes. Or transfused enough of my own blood to counteract the toxin. Either would have worked. She would have lived, but you didn't. She looked at me, he said. And she said, if you do that, you'll never leave this cellar. Not really. You'll stay here with me for whatever time I have left, and when it ends, you'll spend the next 5 centuries looking for the next version of me. And that is not a life. That is a haunting. He paused. She said, go find me again. But this time, cross the threshold, Nora looked at him. At the 500-year-old face of a man who had been given instructions he had spent 5 centuries failing to follow. You sat with her, she said, until morning. And then you let Dorian tell everyone you killed her. If I corrected the record, I would have had to tell them what she said. And what she said was hers. It was not evidence. It was not a defense. It was the last thing she said to me, and I was not going to make it into an argument in a room full of people who would not understand it. The fire, the clock on the mantel, the Atlantic below. Dorian said you were afraid, she said. That you get to the threshold and stop. Yes, were you? Yes, no hesitation. I have been afraid, in one version or another, every time. Afraid of what it means to want something this much. Afraid of what I become if I take it and it goes wrong again. He looked at her. Afraid of what I become if it doesn't. She looked at him. There it was. Under everything. Under the 5 centuries and the resources and the amber eyes and the ability to pull apart a chain-link fence with his hands. The same thing that lives in every person who has ever wanted something so much they couldn't look directly at it. The fear of the getting. Worse than the fear of the losing. She understood that. She understood it completely. Okay, she said. He looked at her. I'm not forgiving you yet, she said, for the things you could have done differently. For my mother, for the years, I'm not there yet. But I understand the shape of it. And that's something, he nodded. Once, small, the nod of someone who had not expected more than that and was genuinely grateful for it. There's something else, she said. Yes, Dorian. He's not done. No, he said something on the phone in Yonkers. She had heard it, processed it on the drive. He said the board needs to convene. He said, wake Cornelia. He said I touched the Bruges stone. Vincent went still. Not his normal controlled stillness. A different kind. The kind that precedes something significant. You heard that, he said. My hearing got better. After the panel in Yonkers. After my blood activated the system, she paused. Is that part of it? It's the beginning of it. Yes, who is Cornelia? He was quiet for a moment. That was one moment too long. Vincent, Cornelia Ashford, he said. The oldest member of the governing council of our kind. Older than Dorian. Older than most things currently in operation. She wrote the foundational law that the council has operated under for 4 centuries. A pause. She is not an enemy exactly. She is more like a principle made into a person. She believes in the law she wrote. She believes in order, in the masquerade, in the continuation of our kind in a form that does not require open war with humanity. That sounds good. It is good. Mostly. He paused. The problem is that she also believes that the prima anima is too significant to be left in the hands of one individual. Even me. She will convene the council. And the council will want to weigh in. On me, on you. On the pact, he looked at her. There is a summit every year. Dorian will use it. He will present the case that my search for the prima anima has destabilized the masquerade, endangered the assembly, created a vulnerability that our enemies could exploit. And Cornelia will listen. Cornelia will evaluate. Which is more dangerous? She looked at the fire. Where is this summit? Geneva. 3 days, and if we don't go, then Dorian presents without opposition. And the council, operating on incomplete information, makes decisions that affect you without your presence or consent. He paused. They will not ignore this. The only question is whether we are there. She looked at him. We, she said. He held her gaze. If you choose it. Yes, she was quiet. Owen downstairs. Owen's voice in the dark in Yonkers. She had Mom's hands. The scar on the woman in Bruges. The same scar her mother had. The concentric circles on the wall of room 14B. The Latin that the night orderly couldn't understand. When he finds you, don't run. Give him a chance to explain. She had given him a chance to explain. And she was still here. Tell me about the pact, she said. He told her, all of it. Not the strategic version. The actual thing, the blood pact, was old. Older than the council's current form. Older than the written law. It predated Cornelia's founding documents by 2 centuries. In its original context, it had been a right of equal partnership. 2 beings, bound by shared blood, whose combined signature became something neither carried alone. Not the making of a servant or a weapon or a tool. The creation of something new. Something the council's tracking systems couldn't parse because it didn't exist in the original taxonomy. To a human who carried the prima anima. The pact offered something specific, the obscuring of the genetic signature that made her a target, not elimination. Obscuring. Her blood would still carry what it carried, but the signal it broadcast to those searching for it would be eclipsed by the ancient sovereign resonance of Vincent's lineage. Like trying to hear a single instrument when the full orchestra is playing. She would not be turned. She would not become what he was. She would keep the warmth and the heartbeat and the ability to walk in noon light without flinching. But she would stop aging in the conventional sense. And she would be, in every legal sense the council recognized, his equal, not his property, not his thrall, his equal. And in exchange, she said, what do you get? He looked at her. I get to stop looking, he said. Sybil, complete. The most honest thing she had heard from him, and possibly from anyone in a very long time. She sat with that. The daylight immunity, she said. If the pact is made, does that? Yes, it resolves. As a consequence of the shared signature, not as a transaction, he paused. I want to be clear about that. It is not why I'm asking. It is a consequence. There is a difference. I know there is, she said. I'm asking because I want to understand all of it. Not because I think you're lying. He looked at her with the expression of someone who has been waiting for exactly that sentence for longer than he knows how to say. I need to think, she said. Of course. And I need to see Owen, down the main corridor. 3rd door on the left. Dr. Osi will be with him. She stood up. Then she stopped. Adela, she said. The woman in Bruges, what did she write? The letter she was finishing when you arrived. The one you took from her. He was quiet for a moment. Then he reached inside his jacket and removed a folded piece of paper. Old, very old, the kind of old that libraries keep behind glass and handle with white cotton gloves. He held it out. She took it, unfolded it with the care it required. The ink was brown with age, the handwriting small and precise. She couldn't read the language, but at the bottom, below the text, was a drawing. Small, careful, an eye and 3 roses. And beneath that, in the same hand, a single line in English. Old English, archaic spelling, but legible. He will come, let him. She looked at those words for a long time, then she folded the letter. Handed it back. I'll come find you, she said. After I see Owen, she went down the main corridor. 3rd door on the left. Owen was awake, propped against 3 pillows in a bed that was significantly larger than anything he had ever slept in. With an IV line in his left arm and color. Actual color. Actual human warmth, returning to his face in increments that Nora could see even in the low lamplight. Dr. Osais had confirmed it within the hour. The centrifuge had been running for less time than Dorian's team had hoped for. The damage was real but reversible. With proper treatment and 2 weeks of rest, Owen would make a full recovery. Nora had made her repeat that last part twice. Dr. Osi was at the small table across the room, making notes. She looked up when Nora came in, nodded. The nod of someone delivering a professional assessment without using words. Stable, improving, out of immediate danger. Nora sat on the edge of the bed. Owen looked at her. You look terrible, he said. Thank you, Owen. I mean it in a caring way, I know you do. She looked at the IV line, at the color in his face, at the fact that he was here and awake and making observations about her appearance, which was, for Owen, essentially a love language. How do you feel? 80%, a pause, maybe 75. But trending toward 80, he shifted against the pillows. Nora, the dreams, they weren't random. I think they were trying to tell me something, that this isn't wrong. Being here. Him, he nodded vaguely upward, meaning the rest of the house, meaning Vincent. I know that sounds insane given everything. It doesn't sound insane, she said. You're being unusually agreeable. Don't get used to it, he almost smiled. Then more seriously. Mom didn't just know about the lineage thing, she knew him, specifically. I could feel it in the dream, the way the woman at the table, but with Mom's hands, the way she looked at him when he came in. It wasn't fear, it wasn't surprise, it was, he searched for the word, relief. Nora said quietly. Owen looked at her. Yeah, he said. Relief. She nodded. She sat with him until his eyes started to get heavy, until the pull of recovery sleep got more persuasive than the pull of consciousness, until she could hear his breathing change and knew he was under. Then she sat there for a while longer, just because she could. Just because he was here and breathing, and she wanted to sit next to that for a few minutes before she had to stand up and be the person who made the next decision. She went back to the library. Vincent was still there. Same chair. The fire had burned lower. Outside the window, the sky had shifted from full dark to the particular blue-black that arrives an hour before dawn and means business. She stood in the doorway. I found something, she said. When Dr. Osi was getting Owen settled earlier, in the study down the hall, I was looking for a phone charger. He looked at her. There's a filing cabinet in that room. Old. The kind with a combination lock. She paused. It was open, he said nothing. There was a brown envelope inside. My name is on it. A pause. Nora Calloway. In my mother's handwriting, she watched his face and she saw it. Subtle, very controlled. But she was getting better at reading the subtleties. The slight tension around the jaw. The way his eyes didn't move. The way something in his posture became very deliberately still in the manner of something that is staying still with intent. He knew about the envelope. How long? She said. It arrived 6 weeks before Iris died, he said. She sent it directly to this address. I don't know how she found it. She was more resourceful than I understood. You kept it, yes. Why didn't you? I was going to give it to you tonight. He held her gaze. I was waiting until Owen was stable. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she crossed the room. Sat down. Took the envelope from her jacket pocket. She had picked it up from the study on the way back. And opened it. Her mother's handwriting. She had not seen it in a long time. The particular way Iris Calloway wrote her capital N, with an extra curve at the top that no handwriting teacher had ever managed to correct. She read it took several minutes. Because she was careful, because she read every line twice. Because some of it she needed to read 3 times before the meaning settled into the right shape. When she finished, she put the pages on her knee. Looked at the fire. The silence went on for a while. She knew, Nora said, the whole time. Since before I was born, almost. Her mother told her. And her mother's mother told her mother. She stopped. The women in our family have known about this for generations. They just didn't tell the men. She looked up. Because the men would try to protect, and the protection would draw attention. Yes, Vincent said. She went into the hospital voluntarily. She checked herself in. Yes, because Dorian was getting close. And a mentally ill woman with a teenage daughter is invisible to that kind of attention. It's not the profile. She was right, Vincent said. It worked for 12 years, and then he figured it out, and then he figured it out. She looked at the pages in her lap. At her mother's handwriting, she wasn't scared, Nora said. The letter isn't scared. She was organized. She was making sure everything was arranged. She paused. She was the most organized person I ever knew. When I was little, I thought it was just how she was. A personality thing. She stopped. She was organized because she knew she might not have a lot of time. She wanted to make sure the things that needed saying got said, even if she wasn't there to say them. Yes, Vincent said. Very quietly, she trusted you with the letter. She did. Why? Because she understood, the way Adela understood, what I was looking for, and she wanted someone to know where her daughter was. Someone who would be invested in the outcome. He paused. I think she also wanted to make sure I knew about Owen. Nora looked up. What about Owen? Vincent held her gaze. The last page, he said. She hadn't read the last page. She turned to it. 2 lines. In her mother's handwriting, the capital N with the extra curve, she read it, read it again, set the pages on her knee and looked at the fire and did not speak for a long time. Owen, she said, slowly. Is your son? I don't know. Vincent said. I did not know until I read the letter. I have no memory of Iris that would. He stopped. There are periods in my history where the continuity is not complete, where the isolation of certain centuries created gaps. I keep records, dates, cities, movements, even when I don't remember the details of what happened inside them. In 2004, my records show Portland. The letter says Portland, 2004. What happened between those two facts? I can't account for. You might have met her and not remembered. It's possible. The phrasing of the letter, she is not accusatory. She is not certain. She says, I believe this to be true. She says, I could be wrong. She says, but if I'm right, then Owen carries more than the secondary marker. And you should know that. Nora was very still. Owen, 19. Her brother. The person she would die for without thinking about it. Who might be? In some version of an accounting she was not prepared to make tonight. More complicated than that. She looked at Vincent at the face of someone who had read the same letter and was holding it the same way she was. Not with ownership, not with agenda, with something that looked, in the firelight, very much like the expression of a person who has been handed a responsibility they did not know was coming and is trying to determine if they are adequate to it. She said nothing. He said nothing. And somehow that was the right answer for both of them. Not tonight, she said finally. We deal with Owen and Geneva and Cornelia Ashford and her ancient legal documents. And after all of that, then we sit down with Owen and we tell him everything and we let him decide what he does with it. Yes, Vincent said, his choice. All of it. Yes, she folded the letter, put it back in the envelope, held it in both hands. Then she said, the pact, I want to do it. He went completely still. Not because I'm scared, she said. Not because Dorian is coming and I need a shield. Because I've been carrying something my whole life that I couldn't name and couldn't find and couldn't put down. And I think I know what it is now. And I think this is the right direction. For the first time in 24 years, I think I might be walking towards something instead of just running in place. He looked at her. Nora, he said. Don't make it weird, she said. Something crossed his face. Not amusement. Something that had forgotten it knew how to be amusement and was cautiously relearning. I want to be clear about one thing, she said. I'm not doing this because of Adela or any version of me that existed in a century I wasn't conscious for. I'm doing it because of me. This version. The one sitting in front of you who hasn't slept in 20 hours and ate an entire plate of crackers and cheese in about 4 minutes flat. I noticed that, he said. I know you noticed. I didn't care. My point is, this is my choice. Not a continuation of someone else's story. Mine, yes, he said. I understand that. Good. She looked at him. Do it now. Before I have 3 hours of sleep and a clearer head and start second-guessing myself. He looked at her for a long moment, then he stood up. He crossed to the desk at the far side of the library, opened a lower drawer and retrieved a knife, small, dark handle. The blade, when it caught the firelight, was not steel. Something older than steel. Obsidian, maybe. Or something without a contemporary name. He came back. Stood in front of her, she stood up. They looked at each other. It will hurt, he said. Most things worth doing do, she said. He raised the blade and cut his own palm, cleanly, without flinching. The dark blood welled up immediately. He held the knife out to her. She took it. Looked at it for exactly 1 second. Enough time to breathe. Then she cut. Sharp, clean. A line diagonally across her left palm, from the base of the thumb to the wrist. She looked at it. That scar, she thought. That's where that scar comes from. Then she pressed her bleeding palm against his. It was not romantic. It was not what she would have expected. There was no euphoria, no soaring, orchestral significance. What there was contact. Real, actual, total contact. The way two things that have been in the same room without touching for a very long time finally just touch. And then the warmth went through her like water through dry ground. Not fire. Not electricity. Water. The slow-spreading seep of something that was finding all the places that had been parched and hadn't known it and moving into them and settling. She felt 5 centuries. Not as a video, not as images, as weight. The specific weight of time alone and time searching and time holding everything still so it doesn't fall apart. The weight of Adela. The weight of every doorway he had stood in and not crossed. She felt all of it. And then, underneath all of it, something else. Something she had not expected. A warmth of a different kind. Not the ancient solitary cold of 5 centuries. Something new. something she had put there. He felt it too. She could tell. She could tell because his breath changed. A single, quiet, involuntary sound. Very small. The sound of something that has been very carefully managed for a very long time becoming, for one moment, unmanaged. Outside the window, the clock of the sky turned. The deep blue-black of pre-dawn began to shift. Almost imperceptibly. Just a lightening at the edges. Just the earliest suggestion of something coming. She kept her hand pressed against his. The fire burned low. And in the east, just barely, the world began to remember that it knew how to be light. Geneva. 3 days later, the facility presented as a private research institute on the northern shore of Lake Geneva. Stone facade, discreet entrance, the kind of European architectural confidence that says, "We have been here for longer than you have been a country. We will be here after you are gone. We are not interested in your opinions about our presence." The car that collected them from the private airfield was black and silent, and the driver did not make conversation. Nora sat in the back with Vincent and looked out the window at the lake. Silver in the early afternoon, cold and still and very large. She was wearing a dress, dark blue. She had chosen it herself. And yes, there were things woven into the lining that were not typically part of formal wear. And yes, Vincent's efficient staff had arranged for this. And yes, she had accepted it without excessive commentary, because she was picking her battles. "Tell me what to expect," she said, a formal convening. Approximately 300 members. Elder council at the head of the room. Dorian will be present. He will have repaired sufficiently in 3 days. He will present his case against my conduct. And Cornelia Ashford, she will be presiding. Has she been told we're coming? No, she looked at him. The element of surprise seemed prudent, he said. "You're learning," she said. Something crossed his face that she was beginning to recognize. The 2-degree shift. The cautious relearning of something it had forgotten how to do. They drove along the lake. The interior of the facility was exactly what she had expected, and nothing she had been prepared for, the scale of it first. A hall that had no business existing inside the building's apparent footprint. The way certain very old buildings have more interior than the exterior architecture accounts for, because they were built when the builders had access to methods that have since been lost or discontinued. Stone columns, vaulted ceiling, chandeliers that were not electric, candlelight multiplied by mirrors, creating a warm amber glow that illuminated approximately 300 people, seated in curved rows facing a raised dais at the far end. 300 people who were not, in the conventional biological sense, people, who were all, with varying degrees of subtlety, turning to look at the doorway, where Nora Calloway from Brooklyn stood in a dark blue dress, with things woven into the lining, holding her chin at an angle she had learned from 12 years of managing customers, who thought minimum wage meant they could be rude to her, and neck looked back at all 300 of them without blinking. Vincent stood beside her, and the effect of that, the two of them, side by side in this doorway, moved through the room like a stone through still water, ripples going outward, people leaning to speak to the person beside them. A murmur that had no individual source but was everywhere. They walked in. Dorian Vane was seated in the 3rd row. He looked at them with an expression that had moved past surprise and arrived at the cold, far country of recalibration. His jaw had a residual stiffness. 3 days was not entirely sufficient. He was, Nora noted, fully healed in every other observable way, and he was already composing something behind his eyes, already building the new argument. At the far end of the hall, on the dais, a woman sat in the central position of 3 chairs, Cornelia Ashford. She did not look the way Nora had imagined. She had imagined the visual language of old power, the formal bearing, the cold eyes, the performed authority of someone who has never had their authority questioned. Cornelia Ashford looked like someone's grandmother. Not a soft grandmother. The kind of grandmother who had run something serious for a very long time and had done it correctly, and had very little patience remaining for people who hadn't. Short silver hair. A dark suit that was formal without being ceremonial. Eyes that were gray and steady and were currently taking in the sight of Nora and Vincent, walking into her, convening without invitation, with the measured expression of someone doing a very rapid and very thorough assessment. She raised one hand. The room went quiet, completely quiet. The way 300 people who have spent centuries learning to be still can be quiet. Like a held breath. Her room-sized pause. "Vincent Hale," Cornelia said. Her voice was not amplified. It didn't need to be. And she looked at Nora. At the prima anima. A pause, Uninvited. We were in the area, Nora said. Silence. 300 pairs of eyes. Something moved across Cornelia Ashford's face. Extremely briefly. Gone before it was fully visible, Dorian Vane, Cornelia said without looking at him, has filed a formal challenge against the conduct of the House of Hale, specifically regarding the unauthorized search for and contact with a prima anima individual, specifically regarding alleged destabilization of masquerade protocols, and specifically, she paused, regarding the performance of the blood pact without council sanction. Nora looked at Vincent. He had known this was coming, she could tell. He had known and had not mentioned the sanction issue specifically, which they were going to talk about later. The pact has been performed, Vincent said. The murmur returned. Louder this time, Cornelia raised her hand again. Quiet, I see that, Cornelia said. She was looking at their joined blood hands, at the faint luminescence that had been present since Newport. The signature of the combined markers visible to those who knew what they were looking at. Which means this convening must address it. She looked at Nora directly for the first time. The foundational law of this council, which I wrote, which I stand by, requires that any being bound by the pact must be given the opportunity to speak before this assembly. Before any formal determination is made, she paused. Miss Calloway, you have the floor. From the third row, Dorian Vane said. The law also requires— I know what the law requires, Dorian, Cornelia said. I wrote it. Miss Calloway. Nora looked at 300 faces. Old faces. All of them. Even the ones that didn't look old. Carrying time the way stone carries water. Absorbed, invisible, structural. She thought about her mother in a hospital room in Portland. She thought about Adela in a cellar in Bruges. She thought about Owen at Harrow Point. 2 weeks into recovery, awake and eating toast and asking Dr. O.C. questions she was declining to fully answer until Nora got back. She stepped forward. My name is Nora Calloway, she said. I was a barista in Brooklyn 9 days ago. I had $247,000 in medical debt and a brother in the hospital, and I was working double shifts 6 days a week, and I had never heard the words prima anima in my life. She paused. And then I had coffee spilled on a man in a suit, and the last 9 days have been, she considered. A lot. Silence. I'm not going to make a legal argument, she said. I don't know your laws well enough to make a legal argument, and I suspect most of you would find that refreshing. She looked around the room. What I can tell you is what I know. I know that Dorian Vane kidnapped my brother and drained his blood to use as a diagnostic tool for a research program my brother did not consent to and was not informed of. I know that the facility in Yonkers contained human subjects in conditions that were— She stopped. Not what anyone should wake up in. She let that land. I know that the person standing beside me spent 500 years looking for something he wanted to protect. Not to use, not to exploit, to protect, and I know the difference. I've spent 3 years watching what people do at a counter when they think nobody's paying attention. She looked at Cornelia. I chose the pact, she said. Not because I was told to. Not because I was afraid. Because it was the right direction. And I'm asking this council to recognize a choice I made with full information and full consciousness. She paused. If Dorian Vane is the alternative standard of conduct you're considering, I'd look closely at that comparison. The room was very quiet. Dorian stood up. The foundational law clearly states that the prima anima cannot be bound without a formal— Sit down, Dorian, Cornelia's voice. Quiet. Absolute. He sat down. Cornelia looked at Nora for a long moment. Then at Vincent, then back at Nora. The foundational law, Cornelia said carefully, was written to protect the prima anima from coercion. From exactly the conduct Mr. Vane has engaged in. It was not written to prevent a voluntary pact made with full information. She paused. I wrote it. I know what I meant. A long silence. The conduct of Dorian Vane's operation in Yonkers will be subject to formal review by this council. Today, from the third row. Cornelia, today, Dorian. She looked at the room. This convening is now addressing a formal investigation into the unauthorized collection of prima anima genetic material without council sanction, the imprisonment of a human non-combatant, and the breach of masquerade protocols in the course of that operation. She looked at the men on either side of her. Initiate containment protocol. The men moved. Dorian stood up again. This is— You don't have the votes for— I have exactly the votes, Cornelia said. I have had the votes since the Yonkers facility was brought to my attention by a source within your own organization 6 hours ago. She looked at him, cold and steady, and with the patience of something that has been here long before him and will be here long after. You overreached, Dorian. You have been overreaching for 3 centuries. This council's first responsibility is the masquerade. What you built in Yonkers was not compatible with the masquerade. And you knew it. He looked at the room, at the faces. Making the calculation in real time, the calculation came back wrong. He knew it came back wrong. He looked at Nora, and then he moved fast toward her, not with the knife this time, just fast. The oldest and most direct kind of threat, Vincent was faster. He caught Dorian by the shoulder, and the sound of the impact, the stone meeting stone, sound of 2 ancient things colliding, rang off the vaulted ceiling and went everywhere. They went down together, a controlled and terrible descent, and then Vincent had him pinned against the floor in a way that was efficient and completely final, his knee across Dorian's chest, one hand at his throat, and Dorian looked up at him. And something happened in his face, not fear, not surrender, something older than both of those things. At least something that lives in a person who has been wrong for so long that the wrongness has become load-bearing, and who has just felt the first structural crack. Let him up, Cornelia said. Vincent stood, stepped back. Dorian got to his feet, slowly. The council guards were already beside him. Formal confinement pending review, Cornelia said. 72 hours minimum. We'll determine from the investigation what follows. Dorian looked at Nora one more time. She held his gaze. He looked away first. The guards took him out. The room exhaled. Cornelia sat back in her chair. Looked at Nora and Vincent standing in the middle of 300 very quiet, very ancient, very attentive faces. You are going to be, Cornelia said, with the tone of someone making a professional assessment, an extraordinary amount of work. I've been told that, Nora said. By whom? My shift manager. My last 3 landlords. Owen, fairly regularly. Cornelia looked at her, then looked at Vincent. You were always going to find her eventually, she said. I told you that in 1847. I told you to stop being theatrical about it. You were right, Vincent said. I usually am. She stood. This council will recognize the pact as valid under foundational law. The formal documentation will be completed by end of session. She looked at Nora one more time, directly, assessing. Come speak with me privately before you leave Geneva. I have information about the Calloway lineage that you should have before you make decisions about the boy. Nora looked at her. The boy, she said. Your brother, Cornelia said. Yes, a pause. I knew your grandmother. She turned and walked through the door behind the dais. The session continued, and Nora stood very still for a moment in the center of that enormous room and let the implications of that settle into the places she had been making room for them to go. Newport. 1 week later. Inside the room off the main corridor, in an old filing cabinet with a combination lock, a brown envelope sat in the lower drawer. Inside the envelope, behind the 2 pages Nora had already read, was a 3rd page. Small, half a page. In Iris Calloway's handwriting, the last thing she had written before she sealed the envelope and found an address she had kept for 20 years and mailed it. Nora found it the following Tuesday when she was looking for a pen. She read it standing at the desk in the study of a clifftop house in Newport in the early afternoon, with the sound of Owen watching something too loud on television in the next room and the faint smell of the ocean coming through the slightly open window. It said, Ronora. By the time you read this, you will know most of it. There are things I could not tell you when you were small. There are things I could not tell you because I didn't know them until it was too late to say them to your face. Your grandmother used to say, the women in our family don't get easy lives. We get significant ones. I used to think that was something people said to make themselves feel better about hard things. I don't think that anymore. I love you. I loved you from the minute I knew you were coming, and I will love you past every version of time I have access to. Trust yourself. You have always been the most capable person in every room you've been in. You've spent your whole life not fully believing that. Believe it now. The man with the amber eyes has been looking for you for a long time. Let him find you. And one more thing, because you deserve to know it before you decide what comes next. Owen is not only your brother in the way you've always understood. He carries something from both sides of this story. I believe, I am not certain, but I believe, that the man with the amber eyes crossed my path in Portland in 2004, before I understood what was happening, before either of us knew what the encounter meant. Owen is the result of a night neither of us would fully remember. He carries more than the secondary marker. He carries something that belongs to both of your worlds. What that means for him and what he chooses to do with it is not my decision to make. It was never mine to make. It is his. Protect him. Tell him when he's ready to hear it, and then let him choose. Mom Nora read it twice. She folded it carefully and held it for a while. She stood at the window and looked at the ocean. She was thinking about Owen in the next room, watching television too loudly, eating cereal out of the box, because apparently that was a thing he did now that he had access to a real kitchen and nobody was monitoring his nutrition. She was thinking about Cornelia Ashford in Geneva, who had known her grandmother, who had said there is information about the Calloway lineage you should have before you make decisions about the boy. She was thinking about Vincent, who had kept the letter, who had waited until Owen was stable, who had stood at doors he should have walked through, and finally, at last, crossed one. She didn't cry right away. She put the letter back in its envelope, put the envelope in her pocket, and went to find Vincent. He was on the balcony off the east wing, standing at the railing, facing the ocean, not doing anything. Just standing in the afternoon, light the way a person stands in something they've been waiting a very long time to stand in. She went out and stood beside him. The salt air came off the water in long, steady gusts. The light was gold and wide and going all the way to the horizon. She handed him the envelope. He took it, looked at it, looked at her. She wrote a third page, Nora said. He opened the envelope. Read it. She watched his face while he read, watched the careful architecture of his expression absorb what the words contained, watched something move through him that he did not try to control. He folded the letter, held it. Yes, he said finally. Quietly, not yes I knew, not yes I suspected, just yes in the way that means, this is real, this is the thing, this is what we do with it now, not tonight, she said. Not this week even. When he's fully recovered, when he's strong enough to hear the whole thing. When he can ask questions and process the answers in the order he needs them. Yes, he said. When he's ready. His choice, she said. His choice, he said. She looked at the water, below them. Through the floor, the sound of something crashing in the kitchen, followed by a very sincere curse word, followed by what was clearly Owen picking it up and continuing whatever he had been doing, alive. Upright. Present, she breathed in, out. Something was beginning. She didn't know exactly what it was. She had the outline of it, the general shape, the first few facts. But she had learned in the last 9 days that the outline was only the beginning, that the actual thing was always more complicated and more surprising and more real than the outline prepared you for. That was okay. She had always been good at showing up for things she wasn't fully prepared for. Later that evening, sitting at the end of the dock below the estate, watching the water go dark as the sun went down, she let herself cry properly and thoroughly for her mother. For everything her mother had built in the dark that Nora had been able to walk into and use without knowing it was there. For the particular love that makes itself invisible so the person it loves can be safe. Vincent found her there and sat down without asking why. That was the right thing to do. That was exactly the right thing. They watched the last of the light leave the water. And in the morning, in the real morning, the actual dawn, the full commitment of it. Vincent was on the balcony off the east wing before the sun came up. Nora was at the window. She had been awake for an hour already. She watched him go out 40 minutes before first light, just stepped through the door and stood at the railing, facing east. Waiting, she didn't go out. This was not her moment. It was his. She understood that the way you understand certain things, not through reasoning, but through recognition. The sky changed, by degrees, the way important things always change, not in one dramatic instant, but incrementally, each small shift building on the one before it, until at some point the cumulative weight of all those increments tips over and becomes something new. The first direct light came over the Atlantic horizon at 6:47. It crossed the railing, it reached his hands first. His hands, which had been cold in every context she had encountered them, on the counter of the Blackthorn, in the car, in the pact, caught the first direct sunlight they had experienced in 5 centuries. He didn't react, not dramatically. Not in any way that would read from a distance as significant. He just stayed there, and she watched his hands in the light, and she understood something about patience, about what it actually means to want something for a very long time and to finally, without ceremony, without an audience, without anyone making a speech about it, simply have it. After a while, without turning around, he said, "Come out if you want." She opened the door and went out. The balcony was cold. The salt air came off the water in long, steady gusts. The light was growing by the minute, warming, becoming more itself. She stood beside him at the railing. They looked at the Atlantic. Owen's making eggs, she said. I can hear him. He's using the good pan. That's what it's for. She looked at the water. The way the early light was hitting it. The long gold lines of it reaching from the horizon inward. Cornelia knew my grandmother, she said. She told me. Last night, what did she say? That your grandmother was the one who first documented the cycle in its current form. That she spent 40 years building the record that Cornelia has been using as the basis for the prima anima legal framework for 2 centuries. He paused. That the women in your family have been, he stopped. Involved, Nora said. Deliberately and strategically involved, he said. Yes, she thought about that about her grandmother, whom she had never met. About her mother, who had organized everything, who had planned for every contingency, who had loved her well enough to disappear so that Nora could be invisible long enough to grow up. They knew this was coming, she said. All of them. They were staging it. That appears to be the case. My entire lineage of women have been running a long game on a 500-year-old vampire and a 300-year-old vampire, he said. And an ancient governing council. She looked at him. My grandmother, she said. My mother. A pause. Me? Yes. She looked back at the water. Nobody asked if I wanted to be part of this, she said. No, I'm choosing to be part of it. I know, because I want to. Not because anyone arranged it, yes. I understand the distinction. Good. She put her hands on the railing, the cold of it through her palms. Because I'm going to have opinions. A lot of them. About how things are run, about Cornelia's ancient legal framework and what it does and doesn't protect. About the facilities like the one in Yonkers. About a lot of things. I would expect nothing less, he said. And Owen gets to decide what he does with everything he knows. Without pressure. Without anyone's long game factoring into it. Yes. She looked at the water. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. The light grew. The Atlantic spread out ahead of them in every direction that mattered. Wide and cold and old and going further than the eye could find. Below them, through the floor, the sound of Owen in the kitchen. The specific crash of a lid dropped on tile, followed by a very sincere curse word, followed by what was clearly him picking it up and continuing, alive, upright. Present, she breathed in. Out something was beginning. She didn't know exactly what it was. She had the outline of it, the general shape, the first few facts. But she had learned in the last 9 days that the outline was only the beginning. That the actual thing was always more complicated and more surprising and more real than the outline prepared you for. That was okay. She had always been good at showing up for things she wasn't fully prepared for. The sun came fully up. The light hit everything at once. The railing, the stone of the balcony, the Atlantic below. Vincent's hands on the railing beside hers. She did not look at his face. Some moments do not need to be witnessed. They need to be left to themselves. She just stood there and let the light be what it was.